My phone buzzed once, then went quiet. A single text from my mother appeared on the screen. "Elena, you don't need to come back. Some places aren't meant for you." No call, no explanation, just that line, cold and final. Outside, snow fell over the city like ash. I stared at my coffee until it turned lukewarm, wondering how a family could erase someone with just 12 words. It was Thanksgiving week, the one time I still believed maybe this year would feel different. But when I opened our family group chat, I saw the photos. Candles, turkey, wine glasses, all tagged. Everyone smiling, except me. I scrolled back to her message, read it again. The silence that followed wasn't loud, it was hollow, like the air right after something breaks. Some places aren't meant for you. I looked around my apartment where the only sound was the fridge humming and the city lights flickering through the snow. In my head, I could see them, Mom laughing at the head of the table, Dad carving the turkey, Ryan cracking another smug joke. They probably told themselves I was too sensitive, too distant, too Elena. And maybe I was. I'd stopped being their quiet fixer years ago. The one who smiled through insults and picked up the bill no one else offered to split. I pressed my palm to the cold window, watching a couple across the street carry groceries together, breath fogging the air. It looked warm, ordinary. Everything I used to want family to feel like. My phone was still on the counter, the message still glowing. I thought about replying, about begging for a reason, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I said it out loud, barely a whisper. "You said I don't belong there." "Fine." Then I added quieter, like a vow only the night could hear, "I'll build something you'll never forget." For a moment, the city seemed to pause, snowflakes hanging, mid-air traffic lights frozen red. And in that stillness, something inside me shifted. If you've ever been cut off by the people who made you, you'll know the exact second pain turns to purpose. That's the moment I stopped being their daughter and started becoming something else entirely. When I was a kid, I didn't draw people, I drew places. While other children filled notebooks with faces and stick figures, mine were covered in roofs, stairs, and windows that led nowhere. I liked how buildings made sense. You could design where things belonged. People weren't like that. My parents never really saw it as talent. To them, it was just another phase. Ryan, my younger brother, was the golden one, the funny one, the one who could skip responsibility and still get praised for potential. I was the quiet one who thought too much. I still remember the night I showed them my first dream. I was 15, sitting at the breakfast table with a rolled-up sketch in my hands, a greenhouse I'd designed from scratch. Sunlight, glass walls, ivy climbing along beams. I thought it was beautiful. I pushed the drawing toward them and said, "I think I could actually build this someday." My dad barely looked up from his newspaper. Mom smiled the kind of smile that means no. "Sweetheart, that's ambitious. But you might want to focus on something practical." Ryan leaned over, grinning. "Looks like a fish tank for plants." They laughed. I didn't. Later that night, I found my drawing crumpled in the trash coffee grounds, staining the paper. That was the night I learned silence could be armor. After that, I stopped showing them what I made. I applied for architecture school in secret, got in on a scholarship. When I called Mom to tell her, she sighed. "Architecture. That's a man's world, honey. You're too soft for that." I went anyway. 3 jobs, secondhand furniture, black coffee, and cold bagels for years. When I finally graduated, I thought they'd be proud. They weren't. Ryan had meetings and Dad's knees were suddenly too bad for long flights. Still, I sent photos of my first office, just a small studio, white walls, 1 folding table. Mom texted back, "Looks small but cute." That's when I stopped needing applause. But their voices still followed me. Ryan would call during family dinners, put me on speaker, bragging about his real estate projects. Mom would laugh. "You and your brother both in buildings. Isn't that funny?" No, it wasn't. Here's the thing about being invisible. You start to get comfortable in the quiet. You build your life brick by brick, thinking no one notices, until one day you look up and realize the thing you've built is stronger than the people who doubted you. It's funny how silence, when kept long enough, starts to sound a lot like strength. And all it takes is one dinner, one sentence, one push to make you remember exactly what you're capable of. The night everything cracked open started quietly. We were gathered around my parents' long oak table, the same one that had seen every birthday, every holiday, every argument politely disguised as family talk. The smell of roasted lamb filled the room. Garlic butter, expensive wine, the kind of dinner that photographs well. Ryan, of course, was the center of gravity. He always was. He was talking about his new business venture, a luxury bar downtown. Everyone leaned in like he was presenting the cure for boredom. Mom looked at him like he hung the moon. Dad nodded in approval, half listening, but smiling anyway. I stayed quiet, cutting my food into small, perfect squares, an old habit from years of pretending calm. Then Ryan looked over. "You're the expert on buildings, right, sis? What do you think of my spot?" "Midtown, right across from the new plaza." I looked up, meeting his smirk. "It's risky," I said. "High rent, not much foot traffic after 9. You'd need a solid draw to keep it alive." The air shifted. Forks paused. Then Mom's voice cut in sharp, polished, sugar-coated. "Elena, please. Your brother's worked hard on this. You always have something critical to say." My throat tightened. I wasn't being critical. I was giving... Ryan chuckled, interrupting. "She doesn't get it, Mom. Not everyone lives in spreadsheets and blueprints." Laughter followed. Familiar. Cruel. Someone even clapped him on the shoulder. I swallowed hard. "I'm just saying," Mom lifted a hand, graceful but final. "Sweetheart, if you can't be supportive, maybe just enjoy your meal." That tone. That quiet blade she'd mastered over the years. The conversation moved on without me like it always did. Ryan kept talking about his investors, which I knew didn't exist. Dad kept nodding. My aunt refilled glasses, and me, I just sat there small again, 15, watching another dream go in the trash. When I finally pushed back my chair, the legs scraped against the tile loud and raw. Everyone looked up. "You know what I said? Maybe you're right. Maybe I really don't belong here." Ryan smirked. "Guess that's finally sinking in." Mom's voice came calm, precise. "Elena, if you can't act like family, maybe you shouldn't come next time." There it was, the line that turned exile into instruction. I didn't argue, didn't cry. I just grabbed my coat and walked out, my heels echoing down that too familiar hallway. Through the reflection in the glass door, I saw them still laughing, still eating as if I'd never existed. When I reached my car, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom, "Don't come back until you learn to respect your brother." I stared at the screen until the glow blurred into the frost on the windshield. That was it. The moment the warmth finally burned out and something colder, cleaner, stronger took its place. The days after that dinner passed in a kind of quiet blur. I didn't call anyone. Not Mom, not Ryan, not even Lydia, my business partner, my one steady constant through every storm. I went to work, smiled when needed, nodded through meetings, but everything inside me felt muted, like I was moving through fog. Then one morning something shifted. An email pinged into my inbox with the subject line, "Property listing, Midtown corner lot." I almost deleted it, until I saw the address, the same block Ryan had bragged about at dinner, the same dream spot he couldn't stop boasting about, and now it was for sale. I sat frozen, staring at the screen. The cursor blinked at the edge of possibility. Lydia poked her head into my office, coffee in hand. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I turned the monitor toward her. "Remember the spot Ryan wanted for his bar?" She squinted. "Yeah, the one he said was too exclusive for small projects." I nodded. "It's open, and I can afford it." For a long moment she said nothing, just stared, lips curving into a slow grin. "You're thinking about buying it, aren't you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. That night I drove down to the lot. The city was half asleep, rain in the air, neon lights flickering from the diner across the street. I parked, stepped out, and walked the cracked perimeter boots crunching over gravel. The old brick walls still stood weathered but strong. Rusted beams reached toward the sky like bones. I could already see it, the glass, the light, the open atrium filled with air and green. A space that didn't need anyone's approval to exist. By the end of the week, I'd signed the offer. By the end of the month, it was mine. Construction began slow then, all at once. Mornings before dawn, steel rising against the skyline. The smell of metal coffee and wet dust became my new perfume. Lydia would show up with 2 cups and a grin. "You're not just building a space. she said once. "You're exorcising ghosts." Maybe she was right. Every beam, every wall, it all felt like rewriting something old. A year passed in blueprints and concrete. No phone calls from home, no texts, just the sound of progress humming through silence. When it finally stood finished, I walked through it at sunrise. Glass above me, marble beneath, light everywhere. My reflection in the mirrored panels looked different still, me, but steadier anchored. We called it the Atrium by Voss. It wasn't revenge. It was proof. My name standing tall on the skyline they said I didn't belong to. A week before the grand opening, Lydia slid a newspaper across my desk. "Look," she said, tapping the headline. "They're calling it the city's new landmark." I smiled, slow, quiet, certain. They told me never to come back. Soon they'd be walking through doors with my name on them. Opening night felt like stepping into another life. The atrium shimmered under amber light, every panel of glass reflecting the city's heartbeat. Soft jazz floated through the air, blending with the hum of voices and champagne laughter. It didn't smell like revenge. It smelled like arrival. Guests poured in, dressed to impress clients, architects, investors, even a few critics who once ignored my calls. I smiled, shook hands, felt the warmth of cameras flashing. Lydia glided through the crowd in a green silk dress, clipboard in one hand, champagne in the other. She leaned close, whispering over the music. "You did it." I smiled back, about to answer, and then I heard it. A voice that didn't belong here. Too loud, too familiar. Ryan. I froze, glass in hand. I turned toward the entrance, and there they were. My brother Tuck's jacket, unbuttoned, confidence, oozing like spilled liquor. Behind him, my mother, clutching her purse like she owned the room. And my father a step behind, quiet as ever, eyes darting everywhere but mine. For half a second, I thought maybe I was hallucinating. But then Ryan's laugh rolled across the marble floor, and the sound made my chest tighten. "Guess word gets around," Lydia murmured beside me. They weren't on the guest list. I knew every name that walked through these doors. At the front desk, the hostess smiled politely. "I'm sorry, sir. There's no reservation under Voss." Ryan frowned. "Check again. It's our name on the building, isn't it?" Mom stepped forward, her tone dripping superiority. "We were told this was a private family event. I'm Mrs. Voss." The hostess hesitated, then looked toward me. I set my glass down, walked across the floor. The chatter around us dimmed with each click of my heels. "Good evening," I said softly. Mom turned. For a heartbeat, confusion crossed her face like she didn't recognize me in my own space. Then came the disapproval, the judgment, the same old script. "Elena." Ryan smirked. "So this is your little project, cute. Thought you'd be designing coffee shops or something." I met his eyes. Calm. It used to be small. Then I stopped listening to people who thought small. His fake smile faltered. "We'll take a table," he said quickly. "We're family after all." I nodded to the hostess. "Take them to the public lounge downstairs. Walk-ins only." Ryan blinked, thrown off. What Mom's voice sharpened. "We're your family, Elena." I held her gaze steady as glass. "You told me not to come back. I just kept my promise." The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Even the pianist hesitated mid-note. Ryan's jaw tightened. "You think this makes you better than us?" I stepped closer until my reflection filled his eyes. "No," I said quietly. "It just means I finally stopped needing you." Then I turned to the hostess. "If they stay, make sure they pay for their drinks." Their faces froze, shock, disbelief, humiliation. Everything they'd once made me feel. I walked away before any of them could speak. The click of my heels trailed into the music. Lydia met me halfway across the room. "They came uninvited," she whispered. "Exactly," I said, just like always. By the time the music faded, the crowd had thinned. Laughter dissolved into soft murmurs, glasses clinking one last time. The atrium shimmered in half-light, my reflection caught between marble and glass. I slipped away to the upper terrace heels in one hand, champagne in the other. Below me, the city glowed streets like silver veins, headlights threading through the night. Through the glass roof, I could still see them. Ryan and my parents sitting stiff at the bar, pretending to belong in a place they once said I'd never build. They didn't see me watching. They never did. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of rain and new steel. It smelled like endings and beginnings at the same time. My phone buzzed a text from Lydia. "You okay?" "They're still downstairs." I typed back, "Let them be. They'll figure it out." Setting the phone aside, I leaned on the railing, tracing my finger along the cold glass. In the reflection, I saw it all at once, me, the city, and the building that rose from everything they broke. A year ago, I was standing outside their house, afraid to knock. Now they were standing outside mine, waiting to be let in. Funny how that turns. For a brief second, I thought about calling Mom, saying something kind, maybe something like closure. But then her old message replayed in my mind, "Some places aren't meant for you." Maybe she was right. That house wasn't meant for me. This one was. Behind me, the doors slid open. Lydia stepped out, coat draped over her arm, hair tousled from the night. "They're leaving," she said softly. I nodded. "Good." She handed me another glass, her smile warm and knowing. "So, what now?" I looked down at the glowing sign above the entrance. The Atrium by Voss. My name, my work, my peace. Now I said I build things that don't need anyone's permission to stand. Lydia clinked her glass against mine. To that. We stood there for a moment, two silhouettes against the skyline. Then I turned toward the elevator, ready to go home. My phone buzzed again, an unknown number, a message. "Your place is beautiful. I didn't know. Mom." I smiled, set the phone face down on the railing, and left it there. Because some stories don't need replies. If you've ever had to build peace from the pieces someone else left behind, trust me, you're not the only one. Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next one.
My name is Doris Schrader, 35 years old. If someone told me a few years ago that my marriage would collapse not because of hatred, but because of biology, or worse, blame, I would have laughed. Stanley and I were the couple everyone envied, same sense of humor, same drive, same quiet devotion. We met at a marketing conference 8 years ago. I was the pragmatic data analyst who believed love was a slow build. He was the dreamer with a grin that disarmed every logical part of me. On our first date, he said, "You look like the kind of woman who never gives up." I thought it was a compliment. I didn't realize it would become my curse. It started with the doctor's words, soft, hesitant, rehearsed. "Your hormone levels are on the lower end, Doris. We might have to consider assisted reproduction." Stanley squeezed my hand in that sterile white room. "It's okay," he whispered. "We'll fight this together." And we did. At first. I became an expert in syringes and ovulation kits. The refrigerator door was a graveyard of appointment reminders and inspirational quotes. Hope is a muscle. He changed too quietly at first. Little things. The way he stopped joking during our nightly walks. The way he'd stare out the window after another failed round saying nothing. And then one night, after our 6th IVF cycle failed, he exhaled sharply and muttered, "Maybe some things just aren't meant to be." I didn't cry. Not then. I was too busy holding him saying, "We'll try again." Months passed. We lived like business partners chasing a fading project. I woke up at 5 a.m. for hormone shots while he scrolled through his phone under the covers. He started going to late meetings. I told myself that's what career people do, chase deals, not dreams. But hope makes you blind. It blinds you to the scent of perfume that isn't yours, to the way he started dressing sharper, to the sudden gym membership he said was stress relief. One afternoon after a grocery run, I noticed something strange in his car, a crumpled paper bag from a pharmacy. Inside was a pregnancy test, not the brand we used. My first instinct was to laugh. Surely it wasn't what I thought. Maybe a colleague's prank. Maybe he bought it for me and forgot. But the date on the receipt was yesterday, and I hadn't been to that store in months. That night, I asked casually, "Hey, you were near Crescent Pharmacy yesterday." He didn't even flinch. "Oh yeah. Needed antacids." The conference lunch messed me up. I smiled, nodded, kissed him goodnight, and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to him breathe beside me, wondering how long lies could sound so normal. The next day, I called in sick. Sat in my car outside his office just to see, not to accuse, just see. At 6:45 p.m., he walked out laughing, with a woman, slim long hair, crimson heels clicking against the pavement. She leaned into him, whispering something that made him grin the way he used to grin at me. Her name, I learned later, was Lara. She worked 2 floors down. She'd once commented on a social media post of ours, cutest couple ever, funny how betrayal always knows how to smile. That night, when Stanley came home smelling like expensive cologne, I didn't confront him. Instead, I cooked dinner, like always grilled salmon, his favorite, and watched him eat, wondering if guilt tasted bitter. When he went to shower, his phone buzzed on the counter. A voicemail. A woman's voice, muffled, breathless. He said you couldn't give him what he needed. But we'll make it right, I promise. My blood turned to ice. He came out, towel draped over his shoulders, humming. I met his eyes and smiled like nothing broke. Inside, something irreversible had begun to crack. That night, I lay awake again. In the glow of the streetlights spilling through our blinds, I stared at the ceiling and whispered to no one. What does it mean to fail someone? Was failure not giving them what they want, or not seeing what they've become? Outside rain began to fall slow and steady. The sound reminded me of the clinic waiting room, the drip of IVs, the hum of machines, the dull ache of hope. I thought of our last fertility appointment just weeks earlier. Dr. Patel had said gently, "Sometimes couples need to redefine what family means." Stanley had smiled and squeezed my hand, but that same night I caught him scrolling baby clothes on his phone. Only later did I realize he wasn't buying them for us. Days blurred into silence. We played our parts. I cooked, he worked. But our house had become a museum, photos of a couple who no longer existed. I'd stand in the hallway staring at the framed ultrasound photo from our first failed attempt, thinking how cruel hope can be, how it doesn't die, it just changes shape. Then came the moment that snapped the string. We were sitting at dinner, rain again, tapping on the windows, when he said without looking up, "Lara's pregnant." Just like that. No build-up, no apology, just 3 words that ended everything. I froze, fork midair. He added quietly, "It just happened. She wasn't supposed to tell me yet, but I thought you should know." There was no thunder, no screaming, only my voice, distant, hollow. "Congratulations." He blinked, startled. "Doris?" I didn't mean. I stood, set my plate down gently, and walked out to the porch. The rain drenched me instantly, but I didn't move. Because for the first time I realized the storm outside wasn't nearly as violent as the one inside. When I woke the next morning, I wasn't sure if last night had been real or some cruel half-dream born of exhaustion. But then I saw at his side of the bed, empty, his phone charger, gone a faint cologne trail on the pillow that wasn't mine to breathe anymore. He'd left for work early, or maybe he just left. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, the way someone stares at a door that's already closed, but still hopes it might open again. By noon, I was on autopilot, brushing my hair, making coffee, replying to work emails with words that felt foreign. But in my chest, something sharp pulsed beneath the calm. Not rage, not grief. Something colder. Clarity. I didn't confront him right away. I waited. For 3 days, I watched patterns. He came home later, his eyes brighter, his phone never out of reach. And when I finally asked quietly, like a confession instead of an accusation, "Do you love her?" He flinched, then smiled without warmth. "I didn't plan this, Doris. But she gave me something you couldn't." He didn't even say child. He just let the word something hang in the air, heavy and cruel. My hands trembled under the table. "I gave you everything," I whispered. He sighed. "That's the problem. You gave too much. You forgot how to live." There it was. The justification, the rewriting of history that cheaters always do, making their betrayal sound like your flaw. That night, I went through his phone. I'd never done it before. I used to think trust meant privacy, but when truth rots the air, you start searching for proof to match the pain. It didn't take long. Threads of messages with Lara, flirty, tender, eventually explicit. One photo of a positive pregnancy test with the caption, "Our miracle finally happened. Maybe this will make him understand." Him, Stanley. My breath caught. The timestamp 2 weeks after our last IVF failure. My hands went numb. I dropped the phone on the counter and stared at it like it might explode. The irony was surgical. All those nights he told me, "It's okay. We'll keep trying," while he was already building a new future with someone else, one that didn't include me. When I finally confronted him, I didn't shout. He walked in, loosened his tie, saw me sitting there with his phone in my hand. For a second, he froze. Then the mask slipped. Annoyance, not guilt. "So you went through my phone," he said. "I found what you hid," I answered. He shrugged, leaned against the counter. "Doris, don't make this uglier than it already is. I didn't cheat to hurt you." I laughed, a small hollow sound. You cheated to heal yourself? That's worse. He looked down, muttered, You wouldn't understand. You were obsessed with the idea of being a mother. I just wanted a wife who remembered she was a woman. That one line sliced deeper than any betrayal could. Because it was true, I had lost myself somewhere between hormone injections and hope. But I'd done it for us. And now he was using my devotion as his excuse. He stayed with friends that night. The next morning he texted, I need time to think. Laura's pregnancy changes everything. I stared at that message until the screen dimmed. Changes everything, like our 7-year marriage was just a line item on a spreadsheet. That evening, I went into what used to be the nursery. The walls were still painted a pale yellow, we'd chosen together, optimism in color form. I sat on the floor, surrounded by unopened boxes of baby clothes I'd ordered months ago when I still believed in miracles. Slowly, methodically, I began packing them away. Each folded onesie felt like a eulogy. By the time I reached the last box, my tears had dried. In their place, a steady, simmering quiet. Days later, he came back. Not with apologies, with justification. He sat at the dining table like it was some negotiation. You know, this doesn't have to be the end, he began. She doesn't want to keep it. I told her I need time. We can start over. I stared at him unblinking. You want to start over after making a baby with someone else? He rubbed his temples. You're taking this too personally. The absurdity almost made me laugh. Too personally, I repeated, voice rising for the first time. You told another woman the only reason you cheated was because I failed you. How personal do you think that feels? He slammed his hand on the table, the mask cracking. You did. You couldn't give me a family. What was I supposed to do? Watch my life pass by while you keep injecting yourself with hormones and crying over test results. Silence followed, the kind that suffocates. I whispered, You could have loved me anyway. The argument ended without resolution. They never do. He left again, this time for good. His suitcase wheels, scraping the tile, echoed like thunder down the hallway. When the door shut, the house went quiet. Too quiet. I stood there surrounded by the ghost of everything we'd built, the wedding photos, the to-do lists, the dreams. On the fridge was our old fertility calendar, circled dates and hopeful hearts drawn beside them. I ripped it off and threw it in the trash, because the miracle he found wasn't mine to mourn. That night, I sat alone on the couch with the lamp casting a dull orange glow. On the table lay my wedding ring, small, delicate, cold. I picked it up, turned it in my fingers, and whispered, You said she gave you life, then go live it. I didn't cry this time. Instead, I felt something uncoil, the first breath of freedom that still hurt to inhale. Because grief and liberation wear the same face at first. They both arrive after everything dies. Silence has a way of becoming its own language. In the weeks after Stanley left, I learned to speak it fluently. At first, it was unbearable. The quiet after his footsteps faded the stillness in the kitchen, where his laughter used to echo. But then something strange happened. The silence started answering me back. I'd wake up at 600 a.m., out of habit, roll over to find the empty space beside me, cold. No toothbrush beside mine. No mug waiting in the sink. Even the couch cushion he used to sink into had straightened out, like the house itself was relieved to be breathing again. The first Sunday alone, I sat in that same spot where he once confessed. The light was softer now, almost forgiving. I made myself tea and replayed his words over and over. You failed me as a woman. It sounded different now, smaller, almost pitiful. The kind of thing said by a man too cowardly to face his own emptiness. Still, grief is sneaky. It visits between errands, in line at the grocery store, or when you accidentally pass the baby aisle. Sometimes I'd catch myself wondering if Laura had given birth yet. Did the baby look like him? Did he get what he wanted? The miracle he blamed me for not giving. But wondering didn't heal anything. So I did what I do best. I turned pain into a project. I organized, deep cleaned, and donated half the house. Each drawer I emptied was like peeling back a layer of denial. A crumpled concert ticket from our first trip together. A letter he wrote during our second IVF attempt. No matter what happens, you'll always be my home. I almost laughed reading it, because now I realized he never meant me. He meant whatever version of me made him feel comfortable. One afternoon, I found a manila envelope tucked in the back of the desk drawer. Old medical files, test results, treatment invoices. I flipped through them absent-mindedly until one page made me stop. It was from his fertility screening nearly 2 years ago. The doctor's notes were blunt. Possible low motility detected. Recommend follow-up testing. But there was no follow-up. He'd never gone back. My chest tightened. I checked the timeline that was before he started hinting that I was the problem. Before he told me to be patient. Before he blamed my body for his ego. The air left my lungs. All those injections, tears, hormone crashes. For what? To protect him from the truth he couldn't bear. I sank onto the floor, clutching the file to my chest, shaking not from sorrow this time, but from the violent electric pulse of clarity. That night I booked an appointment at a new clinic. Different doctor, different city, no shared records. I didn't want comfort. I wanted facts. The waiting room felt colder without him beside me. When my name was called, I walked in steady heart pounding, like I was walking into court instead of a consultation. A week later, the results arrived by email. All parameters normal, no fertility issues detected. I reread the sentence 10 times, eyes blurring. Then I laughed a raw, disbelieving laugh that cracked into a sob halfway through. The truth felt both freeing and infuriating. He had blamed me to hide his shame. He had weaponized my love. I printed the report and pinned it to my fridge right where our fertility calendar used to hang. A private flag of victory. No one else needed to know yet. But I did. That night I cooked for myself. Not to impress anyone, not to share, just to nourish me. Jazz played softly. The windows open, wind threading through the curtains. And for the first time in months, I didn't flinch at the sound of my own laughter. Still, healing isn't linear. Some nights I'd wake up reaching for him, then remember. Other nights I'd replay our last argument not to punish myself, but to memorize it. Because remembering the cruelty was how I stopped romanticizing the past. Sophie, my oldest friend, called often. She didn't ask what happened. She already knew enough to say what mattered. You don't owe anyone your silence, Doris. He built a house on your back then, called it his achievement. Her words sat with me, heavy, honest grounding. 3 months passed. The divorce papers arrived in my inbox like a business transaction. No apology, just digital signatures and asset divisions. I clicked sign, then closed my laptop. It was done, just like that. I walked to the balcony, the city glowing gold beneath the setting sun. Freedom didn't feel triumphant. It felt quiet. Like standing in the ruins of something sacred, realizing the silence was now mine to fill. That night my phone buzzed. Stanley. I hadn't seen his name on my screen since he left. The message was short. Can we talk? My thumb hovered over the reply button. Curiosity and disgust tangled in my stomach. Part of me wanted to ignore him. Part of me wanted to hear what ruins sound like when they try to rebuild. I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I stared at the city lights until dawn crept in, whispering to myself, he took my peace once. He won't take my sleep again. But deep down, I knew his return wasn't far away, and when it came, it wouldn't be for forgiveness. It would be for survival. He came back on a Thursday, not with flowers, not with apologies, but with a baby in his arms. I remember the sound before I saw him, a faint knock, uneven, followed by a whimper that didn't belong to any adult. When I opened the door there, he was Stanley, hair disheveled, eyes bloodshot, clutching a bundle wrapped in pale blue. Doris, his voice cracked, rough from sleepless nights. Please, I didn't know where else to go. For a moment, my body forgot how to breathe. The baby stirred tiny fingers curling against his chest, the softest sound escaping its lips. It shouldn't have meant anything. But something primal inside me twisted, not longing, not love, just an ache carved from all those years I'd been told I couldn't be a mother. Why are you here? My voice was calm, detached, almost clinical. He swallowed hard. Lara's gone. Gone where she left a note. Said she couldn't do this anymore. That I could keep my miracle. Then she disappeared. I leaned against the doorway, arms crossed. Congratulations, I said quietly. You finally got what you wanted, responsibility. His eyes filled with tears. Please, Doris, don't do this. I messed up, I know, but you're the only one who can help. You know how to take care of people. You always did. That line, you always did. As if my love had been a skill, a service, a thing he could summon when convenient. He stepped forward, desperation rising. Look, I can't do this alone. I'm back at work next week, and Noah. The baby, he said quickly. His name's Noah. The name hit me like a ghost of a life that could have been mine. We'd picked that name once years ago in the parking lot of a clinic after another failed round. He'd said, if it's a boy, Noah, for hope. And now that name belonged to someone else's child, one born of deceit. I looked at the tiny face nestled against him, so innocent, so unaware of the chaos that made him. But when I met Stanley's eyes, all I saw was fear. Not love, not regret, fear of his own consequences. "I can't help you," I said, voice steady. He blinked. "You don't mean that." "I do. Please," he whispered. "He cries all night. I haven't slept in days. I can't eat. Lara. She won't even answer her family. I don't know what to do." My silence stretched between us like a wall. Once upon a time, I would have rushed to fix it, brewed him tea, made plans, soothed his guilt. Now I just let the moment hurt. He shifted, rocking the baby slightly. "Just for tonight," he begged. "Please, Doris. Just help me get through tonight." I looked past him to the car parked outside trunk filled with diapers and formula. He hadn't just come to talk. He'd come prepared to stay. "You planned this," I said softly. "You waited until you had nowhere else to go." His mouth opened, then closed. No denial. I took a step closer, not toward him, but toward the truth. "Do you remember what you said to me the last night in this house?" He frowned. "Doris, this isn't the time." "No. You said you failed me as a woman." He froze. "And now you're standing here holding the proof that you failed as a man." His jaw tightened. The baby whimpered. For a second, guilt flickered in his eyes, real, raw, unguarded. Then it disappeared, replaced by something uglier: entitlement. "You can't hold on to this forever," he snapped. "You're better than that." I smiled faintly. "No, Stanley. I'm free because of that." The baby started to cry, a soft, desperate sound that filled the doorway. Stanley bounced him gently, eyes wet. "Please, Doris. He's innocent. Don't punish him for my mistakes." The ache in my chest deepened. I reached out, not to take the baby, but to adjust the blanket slipping from his shoulder. "Take him home, Stanley. He's not mine, and neither are you." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "I can't do this without you." "Yes, you can. You just don't want to." He stood there for a long moment, shoulders shaking. Then he whispered, "You're really done with me, aren't you? I was done the moment you made me doubt myself." He looked down at the baby, then back at me. "You'll regret this," he muttered. "You'll regret walking away when someone needed you." I almost laughed. "You mean when you needed me, not the baby?" And then, because it felt right, I added, "You didn't want a wife, Stanley. You wanted a caretaker with no boundaries. That's not love, that's dependence." He turned to leave. At the top of the steps, he stopped, his voice breaking. "She left a few of his things at her place. I'll have to go back tomorrow." I didn't respond. When the door closed, the house was quiet again. But this time the silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Later that night, the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. When I played it back, an older woman's voice spoke through static. "Doris, it's Margaret, Stanley's mother. I know you're angry, but please, he's not himself. The baby needs stability. He needs a mother's love. And I know you, dear. You've always had that kind of heart." I sat there in the dark phone, glowing in my hand. A mother's love. The words echoed like a curse and a blessing at once. Because I did have that kind of heart. I just wasn't going to waste it on people who mistook it for weakness. I deleted the voicemail and whispered to myself, "He made his bed. Now he can learn how to sing lullabies in it." The night air drifted in through the window, cool and gentle. For the first time, I didn't feel haunted by the sound of crying. Only free. It's strange how fast the world adjusts when your personal earthquake becomes public. At first, people looked at me with that tilted head pity, the kind reserved for women who lost their husbands. But then the whispers began to shift. Someone at Stanley's company leaked the truth that Lara had left, that the baby wasn't the fairy tale ending he'd promised everyone, that I'd been the one quietly keeping things together while he was playing savior in someone else's story. By the end of the month, pity had turned to judgment, not toward me, but toward him. It started with a message from Sophie. "Have you seen his office group chat?" They know. Apparently, Lara had quit without notice, leaving behind her laptop and a folder of emails she'd saved for legal protection. Those emails included Stanley bragging to a colleague about finally being with a real woman. Within days, everyone knew. His boss called it a breach of professionalism. His friends called it karma. And me, I just called it Tuesday. The texts came next, old coworkers, distant relatives, even his mother again. "We didn't know what he did to you. You're stronger than all of us. He's ruined his own reputation, Doris. You just keep shining." But I didn't feel strong. Not yet. Strength, I learned, isn't loud. It's not about revenge posts or public statements. It's about getting up, brushing your hair, and drinking your morning coffee in peace. And peace, I realized, was the one thing Stanley could never give me because he'd never had it himself. One afternoon, I drove to the donation center with a car full of baby clothes, the ones I'd bought years ago during our fertility phase. They'd sat boxed in the attic ghosts of dreams that once mattered. When the volunteer asked if I wanted a receipt for tax purposes, I smiled. "No," I said softly. "Just make sure they go to someone who actually deserves a miracle." I walked out lighter. By summer, I'd started to bloom again. Therapy became less about survival and more about discovery. I painted again badly, but freely. I volunteered at a community arts program for kids, teaching them how to tell stories with color. That's where I met Emma. She was a ceramics instructor, quiet but steady, with eyes that had seen storms but didn't talk about them. We started with casual hellos, shared lunch breaks, the occasional laughter over spilled coffee. Then one evening she said, "You have this calm energy like you rebuilt yourself from ashes." I smiled. I did, and I kept the blueprint this time. Meanwhile, Stanley was unraveling. Sophie sent me screenshots of mutual friends' posts. His coworkers whispered that he'd been taking paternity leave and stress leave back to back. Lara had gone completely off-grid, no one knew where she was. And the baby little Noah had become the silent witness to his father's collapse. His mother called again, this time tearful. "He's not coping, Doris. The baby cries all night. He's exhausted. Please, can't you talk to him?" I hesitated, then said what I should have said months earlier. "No, Margaret. He didn't want my voice when I still had love for him. He doesn't get it now that he needs forgiveness." She sniffed, guilt cutting through her tone. "He's still family." "No," I said, "he's history." Word spread further about how I'd been the one unjustly blamed for infertility. Someone must have told someone, because soon even strangers online were leaving comments on old anniversary photos that still floated around. "He didn't deserve you. You dodged a bullet, girl." I didn't reply, but sometimes I'd scroll through them at night, not for validation, but to remind myself that truth has its own way of surfacing. Then one quiet evening, while painting in my living room, my phone buzzed. Unknown number again. I almost ignored it until the preview lit up. "Stanley, he's sick. Please, Doris, I don't know what to do." My hand went cold. I read it once, twice. The message wasn't long, but the desperation bled through every word. For a moment, I imagined the scene, him pacing in the dim light of his apartment, the baby crying, panic rising. The same man who once told me I wasn't enough of a woman, now begging for the compassion he'd crushed. I placed the phone down on the table, stared at it until the screen dimmed, then turned it over. My therapist's words echoed in my head. "You can acknowledge someone's pain without re-entering it." So I didn't reply. Instead, I opened the window. The evening breeze brushed against my skin, soft cleansing. Somewhere out there, Stanley's world was burning. Mine was finally quiet. And I wasn't going back to put out fires I didn't start. 3 days passed before the next message came. This time it wasn't just text. It was a voicemail. When I pressed play, all I heard was chaos, a baby's wail, Stanley's voice breaking the panic of a man cornered by consequences. "Doris, please, I'm at the hospital. Noah's burning up. I don't know what to do. They're asking for next of kin. And God, I can't do this alone. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Please just come." For a long time, I sat there on the couch, staring at nothing, the sound looping in my head. I wanted to delete it. I wanted to forget. But then I heard it again, that raw, terrified cry in the background. Not his, the baby's. And even though that child wasn't mine, some ancient reflex inside me, something older than reason, deeper than pride, told me I couldn't ignore it. The hospital lights were too bright, too clean, too familiar. I'd spent years in places like this. Waiting rooms, clinics, the scent of antiseptic and anxiety. It felt cruelly poetic that I was back in one, just not for the child I once prayed for. When I walked in, Stanley was sitting slumped in a plastic chair, eyes swollen, hair matted. Noah was asleep in his arms, an oxygen monitor blinking gently against his tiny wrist. He looked up like a man who'd seen a ghost. Maybe he had. "You came," he whispered. I nodded once. "I came for the child, not for you." His shoulders sagged, relief and shame mixing into something unrecognizable. The doctor explained that Noah had a respiratory infection, serious but manageable. Dehydration, fever, exhaustion. "Single parents often get overwhelmed," she said, glancing between us, assuming. I didn't correct her. I didn't say, "He's not mine." When the doctor left, silence took its place, the kind that forces truth out like blood from a wound. I didn't know who else to call. Stanley said finally. I thought maybe what I cut in, that I'd drop everything and save you again. He looked down, rubbing his hands together. I know I don't deserve it, but you were always the calm one. You'd know what to do. I studied him, the same man who once stood taller, sharper, too proud to admit fear. Now his voice trembled. His confidence was gone, replaced by panic. I told you once, I said softly, that love is loyalty. You thought it was excitement. This is what excitement looks like when the lights go out. He winced, jaw tightening, but didn't speak. Hours passed. The nurses changed shifts. The baby's breathing steadied. And in the quiet hum of machines, I saw flashes of the man I once loved, not the cheater, not the coward, but the frightened boy who never learned how to face failure. He whispered. She told me she was on birth control. I didn't even know until it was too late. I thought I could fix it. I thought having the baby would make it right. I looked at him steady. You didn't want a baby, Stanley. You wanted proof you weren't broken. He covered his face, voice cracking. I ruined everything. Yes, I said quietly. You did. The words didn't sting this time. They just existed. Like a fact no longer emotional, just true. Around dawn, Noah stirred. His small hand gripped my finger, eyes fluttering open for the first time. He looked nothing like Stanley, nothing like Lara either. Just a blank canvas, innocent, undeserving of all this pain. I felt a tear slide down my cheek before I could stop it. For a moment, I let myself imagine if life had been different. If love had been honest, maybe this was what motherhood might have felt like. But then I remembered I didn't need someone else's betrayal to define my worth as a woman. I gently set Noah's hand back on the blanket and stood. Stanley looked up confused. You're leaving? Yes. Now, yes. He reached out, voice trembling. Doris, please, I can't do this alone. I met his gaze, calm and final. You already are. That's the lesson. He blinked, stunned. You're just going to walk out? No, Stanley, I'm going to live. As I walked down the hospital corridor, dawn light filtered through the windows, that same gray-blue hue that once greeted me after every failed IVF test. Back then, it felt like the start of another cycle of pain. Now it felt like closure. Outside, the air was crisp. I stood in the parking lot watching the sunrise, the city still half asleep. Somewhere above, the first birds began to sing. And in that quiet moment, I whispered to myself, you were never barren, Doris. You were just waiting to bloom in your own soil. I took one last look at the hospital doors behind me, the place where one chapter ended and another finally began. Then I walked away, the light catching on my face like absolution. 6 months passed. Enough time for the seasons to shift, for old wounds to scar over, for the echoes of a name to finally stop hurting. I didn't realize how much lighter I'd become until one morning, standing at my window, I caught myself smiling at nothing, just the way the sunlight fell across the table, the steam rising from my coffee, the sound of the city waking up. This was peace. Quiet, ordinary, unremarkable peace. And after everything, it felt extraordinary. I'd moved downtown by then, a small apartment overlooking the river, the kind of place where the world feels close yet distant enough to breathe. Every morning, I'd watch the boats drift past the water glinting gold. I'd sit there, notebook in hand, writing pieces of myself back together. My therapist once said, closure isn't something you wait for, it's something you write yourself. So I did. I filled pages with thoughts, letters. I'd never send truths I'd once been too afraid to speak. And in one of those letters, the last one addressed to him, I wrote, Stanley, you didn't break me. You just showed me where I was already strong. Then I tore it up and fed it to the wind over the river. Work was thriving. I'd gotten a quiet promotion team lead for a new project, and my colleagues had started looking to me, not just for numbers, but for steadiness. I'd learned to say no without guilt, to delegate, to leave the office before dark. Sophie still checked in, always with humor. You're glowing, she teased one afternoon over lunch. That must mean you're either in love or you finally started sleeping 8 hours. I smiled. Both, actually. Because there was someone new, Emma. It wasn't fireworks or fate, it was something gentler. A slow, steady unfolding. We met again at the community center. She'd dropped a mug while unpacking art supplies, and I caught it midair. We laughed, and she said, I think you're good at saving fragile things, I replied. Not anymore. Now I just let them find their balance. We started walking together after classes. Small talk, shared silences, long pauses that felt like breathing. Emma never asked about my past. She didn't need to. She saw me as I was, now whole, unguarded, soft again. Some nights she'd stay over, and we'd sit by the window, the city lights reflecting off the water. She'd trace the lines on my palm and whisper, "This means you always find your way home." And I did. Finally, I was home in my own skin and my own story. Every now and then, Stanley's name still surfaced. Mutual friends mentioned he'd moved back with his mother, that he was working remotely, quieter than before. They said Noah was healthy, walking now, babbling words that filled the air of the small apartment they shared. I didn't feel hatred anymore, only distance, like watching a movie I'd seen once but no longer remembered the ending to. Because that part of my life didn't need revisiting, it just needed to stay done. One evening, as I was closing up the art studio, a familiar voice called my name. I turned Sophie, waving her phone. "Did you see the article?" she said, grinning. "They featured your community program front page of the local blog." I laughed, shaking my head. "You're kidding." She handed me the phone, and there it was, a photo of me surrounded by kids painting with messy hands and wide smiles. Headline, "From Broken to Builder: How One Woman Turned Pain into Purpose." For a moment, I just stood there blinking at it. Not because I cared about the recognition, but because it was true. I had built something from the wreckage, something lasting, something mine. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with Emma beside me, both of us wrapped in a blanket, the air cool and sweet. She handed me a mug of tea and asked quietly, "If you could tell your younger self one thing, the one who thought she'd failed, what would it be?" I smiled, looking out at the river. I'd tell her she was never broken. She was just loving people who hadn't learned how to receive love. Emma reached for my hand. And now I said I love the quiet, and I trust myself more than I ever trusted anyone else. The river shimmered beneath the moonlight, and for a moment, everything, every heartbreak, every betrayal, every sleepless night felt like it had led here. I took a deep breath, the kind that feels like a beginning. Because that's what it was. The life after him wasn't about revenge or proving anything. It was about remembering that healing doesn't erase the past, it reclaims it. And as the city lights flickered below, I whispered the words that had once been thrown at me like a curse and turned them into my own quiet triumph. He said I failed him as a woman, but losing him made me whole. If you've ever been blamed for someone else's mistakes, remember this: it's not your failure to carry. Tell me your story in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe healing is its own kind of victory. My name is Betty Holloway, and I'm 29 years old. Once upon a time, I thought love meant patience, that if you gave enough, waited long enough, believed hard enough, the other person would eventually meet you halfway. I was wrong. For 5 years, I stood beside Jonathan Blake, a man I thought I knew better than myself. I was there through every crash and rebuild, when he failed his first business pitch, when he got laid off from the startup that promised him stock options and a future, when he moved back in with his parents for a few months just to reset. Through all of it, I stayed. I believed in him. I worked my 9-to-5 in logistics, brought home steady paychecks, and told him that ambition doesn't have to be loud to be real. He used to laugh, kiss my forehead, and say, "You're my anchor, Betty. You keep me grounded." I didn't realize he meant it as a burden. Everything shifted when Jonathan got his new job marketing coordinator for a tech firm led by a woman named Clara Hughes. He came home glowing. His sentences started changing from we to I. "Clara says my ideas are fresh," he told me one night, sipping his whiskey like he'd just invented fire. "She says I have king energy. You know what that means." I smiled politely, though something inside me tightened. "Maybe it means she's good at flattery," I said softly. He laughed. "You wouldn't get it. It's about drive, Betty. Vision." Vision. I remember that word because it started haunting our conversations. He began dressing differently, talking differently, moving like he was walking through an invisible spotlight. And then came the dinner. It was supposed to be a celebration. Jonathan's father's birthday. His whole family gathered around the long oak table, glasses shining under the chandelier. I brought a bottle of wine and a quiet sense of pride. I'd been part of this family for 5 years, or at least I thought I had. Throughout dinner, Jonathan talked about his new job, his boss, the big world he was finally stepping into. He barely looked at me. When I tried to join in, he brushed me off with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then his father chuckled between bites of steak and said, "So when are you finally going to make this official? Betty's been with you longer than most wives stay married." The laughter that followed was warm until Jonathan's voice sliced through it. "Dad," he said loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm a king, and kings don't settle for women like her." The room went still. I heard the clink of silverware the way his mother's hand froze midair. Jonathan leaned back in his chair, grinning. Betty's sweet, she really is. But I need someone who matches my level now. Someone with ambition. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. The only thing louder than the silence was my heartbeat. His father tried to laugh it off, son, that's not, but the damage was done. Everyone was staring at me, waiting for tears, an outburst, something. Instead, I smiled, a small, quiet smile that didn't reach my eyes either. I folded my napkin, placed it neatly on the table, and stood. My chair scraped against the wooden floor, the sound of a line being drawn. Thank you for dinner, I said, looking straight at his father. The food was wonderful. Then to Jonathan, calm, steady, almost weightless, I hope your kingdom brings you peace. I turned and walked out. Not a single person stopped me. The night air outside was cold, crisp, almost cleansing. As I opened my car door, I felt the first tear roll down my cheek, not from heartbreak, but from something sharper, recognition. He didn't humiliate me because I was small. He did it because he needed to feel big. I sat behind the wheel for a long time, staring at the house through the windshield. Inside, laughter had resumed thin Holloway laughter. People pretending not to notice that a quiet woman had just turned into a storm. When I finally drove away, the headlights stretched across the empty road like veins of light, and I whispered to no one in particular, "You're not a king, Jonathan. You're just a boy who mistook cruelty for confidence." The city blurred around me. I didn't know where I was going, only that I was done standing still. That night, something inside me shifted quietly, permanently. I didn't lose Jonathan at that dinner. I lost the illusion that he was ever mine. And in the silence that followed, I found something else, the first fragile piece of myself. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtains like nothing had changed. But everything had. The apartment still smelled like his cologne, that sharp citrus kind of arrogance that lingers long after it's gone. His shoes were by the door, his jacket slung over the back of a chair. It looked like he'd come home to a life he didn't deserve. I walked through the rooms one last time, letting my fingertips brush against the walls, the couch, the bookshelf I'd built while he brainstormed his next move. Every piece of furniture in that space had a story, and every story ended with me doing the work. In the kitchen, a half-empty coffee cup sat on the counter beside the note I'd written at dawn. I've moved out. The keys are under the mat. I hope you find what you're looking for. My handwriting didn't shake. My heart didn't race. There was only stillness, the kind that comes when you finally stop fighting a losing battle. I packed a single suitcase. Not everything, just enough to live. No photos, no keepsakes, not even the framed picture from our anniversary where he kissed my cheek while texting someone else. By noon, I closed the door for the last time. The lock clicked soft final. For a week, I stayed at a small motel off the highway, one of those quiet places where no one asks questions. The hum of the air conditioner was constant, like white noise erasing memories. I slept more than I thought I would, ate when I remembered. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I just existed a ghost in my own story. And then one evening, sitting on the edge of that creaky motel bed, I turned on my laptop. There it was, the old prototype I'd built years ago, a logistics management software Jonathan once called cute. He said no investor would take a woman seriously in tech. That line used to hurt. Now it fueled me. I renamed the project Hollowayan after myself. If he could build kingdoms, I could build empires quietly. Weeks passed. The motel room became my office. My days blurred into lines of code, cold coffee, and cheap takeout. Every keystroke felt like reclaiming something he'd chipped away. Sometimes in the quiet between midnight and dawn, I'd scroll through old messages, not to feel nostalgia, just to remember who I used to be. His name stayed muted in my phone, but that didn't stop the notifications. Jonathan. Are you serious? You're just leaving, Jonathan. We need to talk. Jonathan. You're overreacting. Each one arrived like a pebble hitting glass, small, pointless, unable to break through. I didn't reply, not once. My silence became my revenge. 2 months later, I moved into a tiny apartment downtown. The walls were bare, the furniture minimal, but it was mine. The first night there, I stood by the window watching city lights flicker below 1,000 tiny lives unfolding. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless. I realized something simple yet terrifying. Jonathan had been my gravity, and I had finally escaped his pull. My best friend Naomi came over one evening with pizza and a look that said she'd been dying to ask. "So," she said between bites, "you're really not going to call him back?" I shook my head. There's nothing to say. She smirked. "Girl, he's losing it." Saw him at a cafe last week looking like someone stole his reflection. I laughed a small foreign sound. Then I guess we're even. Naomi grinned. Just promise me you're not going to vanish into your laptop forever. I'm not vanishing, I said. I'm building something. And I meant it. Nights grew quieter, softer. Somewhere in that silence, I stopped being angry. Anger meant I still cared, and I didn't. Instead, I started noticing the smaller things, the hum of the refrigerator, the rhythm of my typing, the way morning light curved through the blinds. Peace didn't arrive like a storm. It crept in unnoticed and made itself at home. Then one evening, as I was debugging a section of code, Naomi texted me a screenshot from social media. Jonathan was tagged in a photo arm around Clara Hughes, the woman he once called visionary. The caption read, "Power couple goals." I stared at it for a moment. Not hurt, not jealous, just fascinated. How fast some people move from pretending to loving. I closed my laptop, whispered to myself, let him have his throne. Because queens don't chase ghosts. They outgrow them. 3 months later, peace had become my new normal. I'd stopped checking social media, stopped wondering where Jonathan was, stopped trying to rewrite what had already been written. My life was small, maybe, but it was mine. Quiet mornings with black coffee and code, late nights with music playing low in the background. Holloway and my software was starting to get attention. A logistics firm had just reached out about a trial partnership. I should have been nervous. Instead, I felt alive. Then, one Tuesday night around midnight, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Naomi, just one word and a link. Naomi girl. I hesitated before tapping it. The link opened to a long post written by Clara Hughes' assistant, someone I vaguely remembered seeing in a photo once. The headline hit me first. When your boss and your boyfriend ruin your life and each other's. My stomach turned. I started reading. The post was chaos, a firestorm of betrayal and screenshots. Clara had been fired from her company after internal HR complaints. Jonathan had been romantically involved with her during work hours, lying to the team and promising promotions that never existed. The post included photos, blurry, desperate, humiliating. And the worst part, Clara herself had posted her own comment underneath, confirming it all. Apparently, after their affair became public, Jonathan tried to claim she had seduced him. He called her unstable and said she was obsessed. Clara responded by leaking voice messages. In one, Jonathan could be heard whispering, "You're my queen, Clara. Betty was a phase. You're the real thing." I felt the corners of my mouth twitch, not in joy but disbelief. The word queen again. How poetic. The post went viral. By morning, Jonathan's name was trending for all the wrong reasons. His company issued a public statement distancing themselves. His LinkedIn profile disappeared. Naomi called me before sunrise, her voice trembling between outrage and glee. "Did you see it? He's done. Like done. Clara dragged him across the internet. I just sat there on my bed laptop, open a half-drunk cup of tea beside me. My voice was quiet. I saw it. Naomi exhaled, waiting for me to say something cruel, triumphant, but I didn't feel that. It wasn't victory. It was something heavier, closure. Watching him implode was like watching a fire consume a house you'd already moved out of. There's relief, yes, but also sadness for what used to be home. I whispered almost to myself, he built his kingdom on lies. I guess it finally collapsed. That week, the messages started again. "Jonathan, I made mistakes. Can we please talk, Jonathan? You're the only person who really knew me. Jonathan. Please, Betty." I didn't reply. I didn't even open most of them. Then one message appeared late at night. "You won, okay? Is that what you wanted?" I stared at the screen for a long time, then typed one line and deleted it before sending. No, I just wanted peace. Because that was the truth. I didn't need him ruined. I needed him gone. One morning, while checking emails for Halloween, I saw something that made me pause. An investor, someone I'd pitched to a year ago, had responded. They wanted a demo. My hands shook. Not from nerves, from gratitude. All those long nights, all that heartbreak had become momentum. In the silence that followed Jonathan's fall, I'd built something that stood on its own. A week later, Naomi dropped by with wine. "You're trending," she teased, waving her phone. "Someone posted a screenshot of your software pitch. Everyone's talking about how classy you've been through the drama." I blinked. I didn't even post anything. "Exactly," she said, smirking. "Turns out silence really is power." We laughed, clinked glasses, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself to feel proud, not of surviving him, but of rediscovering me. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with the city lights flickering below. thinking of how small the world used to feel when everything revolved around Jonathan. Now it felt infinite. I pulled up my phone, scrolled through old photos, and deleted every trace of him. Every picture, every text, every memory preserved in pixels. Each deletion was a breath, a heartbeat of freedom. When I finished, I whispered, "Long live the Queen." Then I smiled, not because he had fallen, but because I finally stood tall. Silence became my favorite sound. No more apologies disguised as manipulation. No more late-night texts that started with "I miss you" and ended with blame. No more Jonathan. Or so I thought. The first sign he hadn't truly vanished came on a rainy Friday afternoon. I was working on Holloway's first beta launch when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Betty, it's me. Please, I just want to talk." I stared at it unmoved, deleted it. A few minutes later, another message arrived, this time longer, desperate, messy. "I know you saw what happened online. You don't understand. Clara twisted everything. I lost my job, my apartment. Everyone turned their back on me. You always believed in me before. Please don't do this now." Before. That word made me pause. The way he said it, as if my belief was an endless resource he could always return to. I didn't reply. By evening, he called. I didn't answer. He called again and again. The sound of his name flashing across my screen used to send a spark through me. Now it just made my stomach turn. I muted him. The following week, my mom called, her voice careful, like she was walking barefoot over glass. "Sweetheart, Jonathan called me. He sounded lost." I sighed. "He's always lost, Mom. He just calls it destiny." He said he wanted to apologize, said you won't take his calls. "That's because I don't need an apology. I need peace." There was silence. Then she said I told him not to call again. I smiled faintly. Good. Let him sit in the silence he earned. But Jonathan didn't stop. He started reaching out to Naomi, to my old coworkers, even commenting on my LinkedIn posts with fake encouragements. "So proud of what you've built, Betty. I always knew you had it in you." Naomi texted me a screenshot with a single message. "Girl, this man has no shame." I replied. "None. That's how he survives." I learned something in those weeks. Silence hurts narcissists more than insults ever could. It doesn't give them fuel. It starves them. Every time I ignored him, he seemed to lose another piece of himself. And me, I was growing. Holloway's beta launch was a success. The software caught attention for its clean interface and precise logistics algorithms. A small tech publication wrote an article calling it "The Quiet Giant Startup, Led by an Even Quieter Woman." Quiet, I like that word. Because power doesn't always roar. Sometimes it hums beneath the surface until it shakes the ground. Then came the night Naomi dragged me out to celebrate. A rooftop bar, downtown music floating through warm air, the skyline glinting like a promise. She raised her glass. "To freedom, to money, and to the fact that your ex is probably crying into instant noodles right now." I laughed genuinely freely. "You're terrible. That's why you love me." We toasted, the clink of glasses echoing like punctuation to the sentence I'd been waiting to finish for years. On the way home, I got one last message. It wasn't a text this time, it was a voicemail. His voice was cracked, exhausted, and dripping with self-pity. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry, Betty. You didn't deserve what I said. You were good to me, better than I ever was to you. I thought I wanted more, but I lost everything. I know you probably hate me, but I still think about you. Every day." There was a long pause, a shaky inhale. "If you ever want to talk, I'll be waiting." He ended it there. I listened once, then deleted it. The next morning, I renamed my company officially Holloway & Systems. When I filed the trademark, I smiled at the symbolism. I had been the keeper of someone else's dreams for too long. Now I guarded my own. Months passed, seasons changed, my world expanded while his shrank into whispers and rumors. Occasionally I'd hear fragments, Jonathan working odd jobs, moving from city to city trying to rebuild, but he wasn't my problem anymore. He was a cautionary tale. Some nights I'd stand by my window, city lights flickering like embers, and think about how strange it is, how people can love you, use you, and blame you all in the same breath. And yet the silence that used to ache now felt like luxury. Then one day, Naomi sent me a text. "Guess who's going to be at Megan's wedding next weekend?" I stared at the screen. "Don't tell me." "Oh, I'm telling you, the king himself." For the first time in months, I didn't feel dread, just curiosity. Because this time, I wasn't the same girl who walked out of that dinner with tears in her eyes. This time, the queen wasn't leaving the table. She was walking in. The afternoon sunlight hit the church windows like gold dust, scattering across the floor in warm streaks. The air smelled faintly of lilies and champagne. Laughter floated through the courtyard. that easy kind that comes from people who've never had to rebuild themselves from ashes. I stood at the edge of the crowd, a soft smile tugging at my lips. I wasn't nervous, not anymore. I'd been through worse battles than small talk and finger food. Naomi elbowed me gently. There he is, 2 o'clock near the buffet. I turned. Jonathan. He looked smaller. The sharp confidence that once clung to him like cologne was gone. His suit didn't fit quite right, too loose, like he'd lost both weight and direction. His hair was longer, unkempt, his eyes searching the room for validation that never came. For a moment I didn't recognize him. Not the man who'd once sat across from me telling me he was a king. He noticed me then. His entire posture shifted, a flicker of disbelief, a half smile, trying to resurface. Betty, he said, walking to Holloway, me voice low, rehearsed. I didn't move. I just watched him, calm as still water. Up close, the cracks were clearer, the tremble in his jaw, the slight stutter when he spoke. You look incredible, he said finally. You've changed. I tilted my head. No, I just stopped shrinking. He laughed Hollowayly, looking around. Guess I deserved that. Yes, I said simply. You did. We stood there for a moment, surrounded by the soft chaos of a wedding clinking glasses music, the hum of distant joy. He exhaled. I've been meaning to reach out again, but I figured you'd block me. I did. He blinked. Oh! The silence stretched between us. I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry, he said, eyes glassy. That night at dinner, what I said, I was trying to impress them. To sound confident, I didn't mean it. I smiled small and cold. You meant every word. You just didn't expect to regret them. He swallowed. I lost everything, Betty. The job, Clara, my reputation. I guess I thought I was chasing something bigger. Turns out I was just running away from myself. I met his eyes, and from me. He nodded slowly. Yeah, from you. For the first time, his voice wasn't arrogant. It was fragile, thin. The sound of someone realizing too late that they'd burned the bridge that led home. He took a small step closer. I heard about Holloway and Systems. You did it, huh? I did. I'm proud of you. I let out a quiet breath that could have been a laugh. No, you're not. You're just shocked I did it without you. He flinched. Betty, I'm serious. You were always the smart one. I see that now. I don't expect anything. I miss you. I looked at him, really looked. Not the man I used to love, not the ghost who haunted my silence, but just another flawed human being who'd built his life on illusions. You don't miss me, I said softly. You miss the version of yourself you saw through my eyes. His face fell. The words landed the way truth always does, quiet but irreversible. He tried again. Can we at least talk sometime? Grab coffee, maybe. I shook my head gently. Jonathan, that chapter's done. You said you were a king. I believed you. And like every king who forgets his crown, you lost your kingdom. He exhaled sharply. You're really not going to give me a chance. I met his gaze, calm, unwavering. I already gave you 5 years of them. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The music swelled from inside the hall. The bride and groom were dancing, spinning in the golden light. Jonathan looked at me one last time, eyes filled with the ache of someone who finally understood what they threw away. I smiled, not cruelly, not triumphantly, but with peace. Take care, Jonathan. And then I turned away. As I walked through the courtyard, the world seemed brighter somehow, not because of him, but because of everything he no longer dimmed. Naomi caught up to me, eyes wide. Did he try to talk? Of course, I said. Kings always think they can summon their queens back. She grinned. And what did you do? I reminded him I built my own throne. Later that night, I stood by my apartment window, watching the city pulse beneath me. Somewhere out there, Jonathan was probably staring at an empty phone screen, replaying his mistakes. But I didn't hate him. I didn't love him either. I just let him go, completely. Because closure isn't revenge, it's freedom. I whispered into the quiet queens, don't wait for crowns. They make their own. And for the first time in years, I felt weightless.